Hey guys, welcome back to the Y'all Be Good podcast. Heather and Ralph. Where are
we? We're in a new space.
We are in the new space.
It's naked.
Those of you who know and follow along on our little line cuts, you'll know that we are moving and expanding into a much larger space. It's very much needed.
A lot more room for activities.
But we want to show you something really exciting. This is kind of going to be the main area where we cut and do all the stuff. This week on the podcast, we're going to have Nurse Practitioner Jackie, who's coming in to talk again. We're going to do the re-release of the autism, ADD, ADHD, what that looks like within the family. But this is really cool. I'm going to let Heather tell you about what we're doing in the new space.
This is where our sensory room's going to be, but not the whole thing. Ta-da! There's going to be 10 by 10 space here. We're going to walk in through the door here. We're going to have a chair, a car, some seating, some benching, some stuff on the walls. We have a window. The windows to the walls. And then we'll be able to have our privacy. It'll be quiet back here. And then from what Ralph's told me, we'll have some people helping us out with setting it up.
Yeah, we've had folks reach out, local therapists reach out, and they've said, like, if you need some help setting this up so that it is sensory friendly, all that good stuff, that's the plan. That's what we want to do.
Imagine this space, like if you've ever gone to a Sola suite, there's one right around the corner from here. Yeah. That's what the room will kind of be set up like, but a little bit more geared towards
sensory friendliness
and kids.
So stick around for the podcast with Nurse Jackie, and we will see you guys here at Little Line Cuts.
We miss you, Jackie.
Hey y'all, and welcome back to Y'all Be Good, the show where we sit down with everyday folks doing extraordinary things right here in our own community. I'm Ralph, and along with my co-host Heather, together we're the voices behind Y'all Be Good, a podcast brought to you by Little Line Cuts. Today's episode is a special one, and one that a lot of you have been waiting for. We're diving into a conversation that's so personal for so many, including myself and my family, and it is all about ADD, ADHD, and autism. Our guest is Jackie, a brilliant and compassionate medical professional who helps us break down the facts, challenge the stereotypes, and shine a light on the real experiences of neurodivergent individuals and families. So whether you're a parent, a teacher, a friend, or just someone trying to learn and be better, this episode is for you. So sit back, buckle up, and y'all be good.
Let's go!
Exciting.
Yeah.
I've been told I'm loud, so.
That's okay. You know what? The louder the better. Heather, Jackie.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I'm excited.
Heather's been one of our leading voices here at the shop with helping out with kiddos on the spectrum or with accommodation. We like to say kids with accommodations. So tell us a little bit about yourself. We in the podcast, honestly, I told you a little bit about the podcast. It's very community based. We love getting to know the people who are doing things in the area. And we work with so many families that come through with kiddos on the spectrum or with accommodations. And maybe they don't know that their kiddo is on the spectrum or in that realm. So one thing we wanted to hang out and just kind of talk about was you give us some pointers and talk all things ADD, ADHD, autism. But let's hear a little bit about you. You're married.
Yeah.
I've gathered that much. You have 3 kiddos.
3 kiddos.
Nice. How old are they?
They are 20, 16, and about to be 14.
Oh, you got big kids.
They are big kids now.
Very cool.
That explains all the gray hair.
You know what? It is coming quickly.
Is that why I don't have any?
That's why you don't have any gray hair. That's why.
I gave up covering it up a while ago.
No one should cover it up. I think it's beautiful.
No, so yeah, I'm married. My husband and I will hit our 26th wedding anniversary this next week. We have the 3 kids. I've been a pediatric NP for 21 years now. Before that, I was a pediatric ER nurse, and I worked adult med surg. I've kind of we've lived a few different places. So I've practiced in St. Louis and Illinois, and then now I've been at my current place for about 10 years.
Yeah. Did you guys, obviously you lived out there. Are you from the area?
No, I've actually moved around a few different times when I was a kid. I was born in Northern Illinois, but my dad took a couple different teaching principal positions. So I've lived in California, Colorado. I went to high school in Colorado, so that's where I usually say I grew up, is in Denver.
Yeah.
And then because my husband has taken a couple different teaching positions over the years, we lived in St. Louis and then Chicago area, and then moved up to southern Wisconsin.
Nice. What kind of teacher is he?
He's a high school band director.
Really?
Yes.
Around here?
Out west. We live out in Walworth County. So.
Oh, very cool. So you guys have some musical family. You guys have a little bit of everything going on.
Yeah, we don't sit still well at my house.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm learning that we don't either, actually, now that we're jumping into this.
Your kids play instruments?
They have at various points. My oldest has decided that's not what he wants to do a whole lot of, but still loves music, plays guitar, goofs around on drums. My daughter's in the throes of high school band right now and loves it. My youngest, is still trying to decide if he wants to play in high school, but he likes choir and stuff like that. So either way, they're all involved in something musical and arts, and that's kind of, we're like, okay, we're at peace with that.
Nice. Yeah, that's us. We're not too sporty at my house. We're more.
There were several years of soccer, but I'm glad we've outgrown that.
Oh, sure.
I feel like it's a rite of passage. You do soccer.
I've survived soccer mom stage. Moving on.
Why kiddos? Why do you work with kiddos?
So when I was in high school and I knew I wanted to do something in the medical field, my junior year, our high school had a career shadowing opportunity. And I was like, okay, cool. This is my chance to go see, do I want to be a doctor? Do I want to be a medical technologist? I hadn't even really thought about nursing. And I got hooked up with a gal who was the vice president of nursing for the Children's Hospital out in Denver. And in the course of 3 days, I got to trail a couple of different pediatric nurses. I got to watch the VP do some admin stuff, which convinced me I never wanted to sit in boardrooms. I got to go with an adult pulmonologist. I got to go with an adult respiratory therapist. I actually found out what a pediatric NP was during that experience. I had never even heard of that before that. And I was like, I like the kid stuff. The adult stuff is pretty serious. The kid stuff's kind of, this is fun. And I had worked in early childhood centers as like my after school or summer job for a while and things like that, and enjoyed kids. So I kind of knew rolling into nursing school that I wanted to end up in pediatrics.
You said pediatric NP. What is a pediatric NP?
So I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner, and a nurse practitioner gets their nursing education first, usually a bachelor's in nursing, and then way back when I did it, it was a master's program. Now a lot of places have turned it into a doctorate degree, but it's an advanced degree, and you get training in diagnostic and diagnosis and how to manage diseases. And so the easy layman's explanation is kind of halfway between a nurse and a doctor. So I can see kids in the office, diagnose their ear infections, do their checkups, all of those kinds of things, write prescriptions. Not quite as in-depth of training as a doctor. More so, it's just a little bit different philosophy, because nursing training in that has a little bit different philosophy that's more function-based. Medical training tends to be more pathology-based, and kind of, so it's a little bit different perspective.
What do you like to go by? When I bring you up at home, I was telling my wife, and she was like, well, you can't call her Nurse Jackie because of the TV show.
This is true. That did not help me. I just tell people I'm Jackie. They're allowed, call me by my first name. Yeah. I'm the NP. It's fine.
Very cool. Well, I have some little topics that we wanted to hit really quickly.
Go for it.
Well, I was telling Heather that we've been diving into exploring I hate to say the diagnosis of, but for lack of a better term, with that in my kiddos, and just seeing little things along the way. My firstborn, he's 13 now. We knew early on there was a little touch of the autism somewhere in there, but at least for us and in our household, growing up as a Mexican kid and that kind of thing, we weren't necessarily always thinking, okay, let's look at this in the light of a scientific diagnosis, as opposed to he'll grow out of it. He's just a kid, right? I remember him being in third grade or something. And I'm like, well, he's a boy. He's rambunctious, but there was a little bit more to it. He needed a special chair. He needed one of those little wibbly wobbly things. And so within that, and now looking back, I'm like, well, it probably would have been better to get him checked out a little while ago, but now he's been living life into 8th grade. But we're kind of trickling down with my middle and now my youngest and looking into that. Can you give us just a brief little overview of what ADHD is as opposed to ADD or autism?
One thing I will say, and then I'll get into that, is I always joke around about especially with autism, the only reason we call it a disorder is for insurance purposes.
Oh.
So when you go, okay, well, I don't want to call it a disorder. No, it's a different way of thinking. It's a neurodivergent thing. So I always kind of joke around that the only reason it gets tagged with a disorder is for insurance purposes.
Oh, cool.
And that means it's not necessarily a negative thing.
Yeah.
So ADD and ADHD, they used to get separated diagnostically. So in mental health, you hear about something called the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual.
The DSM.
DSM-5 is the version we're on now. And so when we do medical diagnoses and things like that, it's coming out of that book. It has the diagnostic criteria. It has how long they've had to have symptoms and things. So we used to kind of treat them differently. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. ADD stands for just Attention Deficit Disorder. So it implies they're not as hyper. A couple of versions of the book ago, they've said all under one umbrella. We call it all ADHD, but there's inattentive type, predominantly hyperactive type, and combined type. And I always kind of say, even if we say it's predominantly one or the other, a lot of kids have overlap. And then autism is something that's specific to social development. There's a lot of pieces that go with it. But when we look at kind of trying to parse out if something is autism or not, it boils down to social interactions. And so we talk about it's neurodevelopmental, which means it was there from the start. We just don't necessarily see the symptoms till later on, depending on the severity and what's getting in their way, so to speak. And it's unique to social development as opposed to things like ADHD or if they have a speech delay or things like that. A lot of children who have autism will have some sort of speech delay or speech differences. In some kids, it's the 5-year-old who sounds like they're the college professor, who's very formal in their speech patterns and things like that. So you can have kids who talk early and often, but still have kind of a unique speech pattern. Or you can have kids who had speech delays and didn't talk till they were 4 or 10 or what have you. So we talk about it in terms of things like nonverbal social cues, being able to read facial expressions or make facial expressions. Do they have varying tones of voice? Do they use gestures? I talk with my hands all the time. I've injured people. But it's those kinds of nonverbal pieces to it. It's the idea of what we call reciprocal conversations and being able to pick up on somebody's cue of, I like ice cream, and say, oh, I love ice cream too, and blah, blah, blah. Or do they kind of go, and we're going to watch this cartoon, and kind of sail past it type of thing. We also look at things, we call them restrictive interests or repetitive behaviors. And so when I first started working in autism, I was in St. Louis, and the big history thing there is the 1904 World's Fair. And I had one patient tell me everything you ever wanted to know about the 1904 World's Fair, but couldn't remember what he ate for lunch that day. So that's that restriction of interest. Those are the deep dive rabbit hole, can tell you every dinosaur by their full scientific name. And I'm like, I know T-Rex. So those kinds of or like very restricted interest type of things, or some repetitive behaviors. And so sometimes it's things like flapping, or that they have like a tic or those types of things, or that they've got to do something over and over again to kind of soothe themselves. So those are the diagnostic criteria and things that we look at with autism. With ADD and ADHD, the spiel I give my patients is, it got named by somebody who doesn't have it. It's what you see on the outside.
Sure.
Difficulty focusing, they're hyperactive, they're impulsive. But what we know, in your brain, you have different neurotransmitters that are sending signals back and forth. And 2 of them, norepinephrine and dopamine, are what we call stimulant neurotransmitters. If your brain doesn't make enough of them, you don't coordinate executive functions very well. And executive functions aren't necessary for survival, but they make it a whole lot easier. It's the ability to stay organized and remember where you put something. It's the ability to prioritize what's the most important thing and be able to kind of leave the other stuff be. It's the ability to control emotional responses. So sometimes little slights get really big responses, and other times when you're like, this is going to be ugly, and they go, no big deal. Boop, boop, boop. Plays a role with working memory. So if you've only been shown how to do something once or twice and it didn't stick, you go home and try to do your homework that night and you can't remember how to do that math problem again. Plays a role with frustration tolerance. When you don't have enough of those neurotransmitter stimulants, you get frustrated and you have a really hard time drilling back down and getting back to it or problem solving it. And so you'll see some of those impulsive behaviors and that kind of easy temper and things like that. So all of those things, even motor planning is a piece of that. And so I joke around about ADHD kids can be clumsy and get going faster than their brain can keep up to say, you should stop now before you run into the wall. So all of those pieces are actually a part of ADHD. And so every kid with ADHD kind of pops up differently. Ralph's heard me say before, all three of my kids do have ADHD, and I laugh that we have 3 different flavors in our house. And so we kind of know we have to adjust depending on who we're dealing with, because my youngest can still remember that he needs to take his trombone for band lessons on Tuesday, whether I remind him or not. And my other 2, if it wasn't like glued to their backpack, they forgot their instrument that day. So everybody's a little bit different in kind of how they present with ADHD and things like that, but it impacts all of those parts of functioning.
Sure. And it seems to be, I guess, a little bit magnified in that realm, right? Because I don't know. I mean, well, the podcast listeners have heard me say this already. I know from talking and just kind of hearing what the symptoms were when I was talking when I was with my son. I was like, oh Lord, I have this. Like I definitely have this. And then, but could it just be that everyone, well, obviously everyone functions in this realm somewhere, but some people just have a little less?
Everybody's on a spectrum.
Sure, yeah.
Everybody has a tolerance for how much they can sit still versus they've got to be up and moving. I joke around, I went into nursing because I don't sit still well. I did 1 summer of office work in college and went, oh, I'm really glad I picked the major I picked because I would drive me nuts. Everybody has an attention span, and some of them are longer than others, whether or not you meet diagnostic criteria. Everybody has that degree of, I can't tolerate this any longer. I joke around about all of us have food textures we don't like. All of us have clothing we don't feel comfortable in. Any of those things kind of fall on a spectrum, and I always say it's not really diagnostic unless we're interfering with function. And so a lot of how much it becomes a problem or not is the setting you're in and kind of what do you have to do to function. I always explain to parents that the hardest time to have ADHD is when you're in formal education. You have to sit still on your desk. You have to take all the subjects, whether you have any interest in it or not. Even kids with ADHD can focus on things that are interesting to them. It lights up a part of their brain. It sends out dopamine. They go, cool, I can hang with this, which is why they can play video games for 8 hours, but can't sit at the table for 10 minutes. It's why they can deep dive and learn a lot of things about something because it's really interesting to them. They say there's a lot of really successful business people out there with ADHD. Richard Branson has said he's got ADHD. The guy who started JetBlue has ADHD. And that hyper focus allowed them to sit there and creatively come up with really good business plans. Don't ask if they paid their mortgage during that time. Somebody else took care of that. It's the boring, mundane things that don't light up our brains that get in the way.
Yeah.
And so the hardest time to have ADHD is when you have to conform to those social expectations of you sit still in your class, you've got to, focus and read this book that you really have no interest in reading in English class. You have to learn about history if that's not your thing. That's the hardest time to have ADHD. There are a lot of adults walking the planet who could hit diagnostic criteria, maybe didn't get it evaluated when they were a kid because it wasn't causing enough problem or, oh, it's just a boy, you'll outgrow it, or, you're not the one disruptive, you're the girl who's spacing out because we tend to see more of the inattentive type in females. So you're spacey, they just assume you're a flighty, spacey kid, not that this is something that has a diagnosis to go with it. And as adults, we land in careers we have an interest in, we kind of set up our world to deal with how well we sit still or not. So again, I landed in nursing where you get up and move, you see different patients all day. My children may come by some of their traits. Honestly, I may have some of that. I've never been diagnosed, but I know if I have to sit in faculty meetings all day, I'm going to be climbing the wall.
Sure.
So it's to the degree of to what degree is it interfering with their ability to function? Is it interfering with how they feel about themselves? Because if they're constantly getting in trouble at school and getting told to sit down and hush, that has a negative impact after a while. Then it's time to intervene. If we're struggling to do the things we need to do to work with our friends because we get impulsive and we get upset easily, and so if they don't want to do what we want to do, we're getting into arguments and things like that. Kids have things they have to do to function too. Adults, we have to go to work. We have to remember to pay our bills. We have to, feed the dog. All of those things. Kids are supposed to be making friends, learning how to play games, figuring out how to cooperate, learning those basic academic pieces. And if we're not able to function, then it reaches that point of diagnostic as opposed to all of us have those traits.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Absolutely.
Because I know, like, growing up, we're not Mexican, but my parents had the
I
same
say she's more Mexican than I am most of the time.
But my
actually.
parents had that, like, everyone, like, a lot of 90 parents were, oh no, everyone's getting diagnosed with it. And it's like I kind of have this talk with a lot of the things like autism and all that stuff is like, but we treated it differently before. It was like you said, oh, boys will be boys, or the R word, and they get put into, put out of the way.
Over here, and you're dealt with, and off we go. And instead of actually addressing kind of what the thing was. And yeah, there's a lot more diagnoses nowadays, but I also, especially on the ADHD side, I go, look how many adults have gone in and gotten diagnosed now that weren't diagnosed as kids, probably met the diagnostic criteria back then, weren't enough of a disruption or problem to say, oh, it's worth going and getting this, or to get their parents to go, okay, this is a problem, we should go see somebody, whatever it was. But now are like, is that why I can't get something started and have to procrastinate for something that ends up taking me 3 minutes? And the more I kind of laugh, the more we get adults in doing the research and on the medical side who experience these things as kids, the more we're finding out what that looks like as adults, the more adults are going, is that why I always have my leg twitching? Or is that why I always had trouble? And so you're seeing more adults getting diagnosed both with autism and with ADHD. And it's stuff that if you were on the milder end of things, just didn't get noticed and just didn't get pursued, that now we're going, well, at least we have a name for it. And then you know why you do the thing you do.
Well, with so many people going on the internet now, and like I see it on TikTok all the time, like I have it, I've got a touch of autism, and then
or six signs that you have autism.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
And like some of it could also be explained by other things too. Like you said, it's not disruptive.
Right.
Like PTSD can cause a lot of those things.
Very much so.
And I don't know, I feel like that kind of puts a bad taste in people's mouth too, now that everyone's like, oh my God, me too.
It's this.
And it's like, we're all looking for that solution to our issues.
Right.
But it's like, no, maybe do other work too.
Right.
But
yeah, and there's lots of overlap. And so some of I kind of laugh sometimes when I see the TikToks and the Reels go by and go, yeah, that could be 17 different things. Go talk to an expert.
Yeah.
Because you're exactly right. Trauma and things like that, especially because I specialize in pediatrics, that can look like a lot of ADHD and stuff like that. And so it's part of why you need to actually go talk to somebody who knows what they're doing with kids to kind of comb that out and parse that out and figure out what's a reaction, what's been there from the get-go. Because the other thing with ADHD is even when we don't diagnose kids until they're in like middle school and high school, we'll say, were some of these symptoms present before the age of 12? Were they there, early on? And pretty much consistently parents go, yeah, they were the toddler that never sat still, or yeah, the teachers have been saying something since first, second grade, but his grades were good, so we didn't do it.
Sure.
Fair enough. It wasn't interfering with function. But when you look back at the symptoms, they were there. So, that's part of it, is kind of parsing out, because it has gotten to be a very trendy, popular thing too, to say, oh, it's this. But there's also a lot of adults who went, oh, yeah, looking back, I had that problem even back when I was a kid. it's not, I'm on my phone so much I have an attention span of 3.2 seconds. There's other pieces to it.
Well, it's kind of because, like, the more that we look into it, the more that we talk about it, the more acceptance we get for it. But then it's also that stigma of not, everyone has it. But then it also adds more resources to people who do have like,
it. Right.
celiacs have, even though everyone's on a gluten-free diet,
Right.
like, it's actually benefited a lot of the people I know that do have celiacs.
Right.
Because
It's actually a thing, and there's more products available, and people start to go, oh, when you ask, you're not just trying to be, I want the trendy
Pretentious.
diet. This is a true medical, I need to know that this has not touched this. So, yeah, there's a lot of benefit to shining light on it, and you're always going to have some people who go, oh, well, that explains this, and this, and you go, not so much. But you're always going to have some folks that kind of go, well, maybe that's it, and kind of come over here and define it. But the more we shine light on it and the more we recognize what it is, it makes a lot more sense. And that's why we see, like, the incidence of autism has gone up so much. We've gotten a lot better at screening for it. We screen it in 9 months and 18 months and 30 months. And, all of that has compounded into catching more kids and catching those odd duck kids that just cruised along because they were successful in school. They may not have had an easy time making friends, but they were doing fine, that you look back and go, yeah, that might explain. So, we've gotten better at diagnosing it too. And yeah, more people are aware of it. We've done a lot of outreach. CDC's had a big program to say, look for these things with your kid. If you're seeing those, you need to talk to your pediatrician, so that we catch autism earlier and can help intervene and help them better.
That kind of leads me into kind of like a fork in the road. Two things that I wanted to touch on. I'll say the first one first, and this one, maybe I shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it.
Go for it.
you can always cut it out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can always cut it out. We are not live.
Editing is a thing.
Yeah. I wonder how much of it for parents that we see and hear, unfortunately, at least in my perspective, looking from the outside in, I do feel like it is a scapegoat sometimes for families who maybe they just got a bad kid, maybe need a little bit more direction with their kiddo. But it's so simple, I think, now to say, oh, he has ADHD, but they've never looked into it, or they've never really, they're kind of just using that. Is that something that you've seen, or?
A little bit. By the time they kind of come to see me for diagnostic, usually, at least they, either I've been their primary care and we've said, let's try these behavioral things first, and let's do that. Or their primary care provider has said, let's try these behavioral approaches first. And that's part of why you don't see a lot of kids formally diagnosed with ADHD before the age of 6. There's some few kids that are severe that we'll diagnose a little bit earlier, but for the most part, we won't diagnose it till 6 because some of that is age-appropriate behavior, and some of it is we need to try these behavior modifications first because discipline is a thing, and you can have ADHD. It's not a permission to be a wild child. It is.
I know that firsthand.
Yeah. 3 for 3 at my house.
No, I met my ex-husband.
That's a whole different problem. No, but that you still have to have discipline. You still have to set boundaries. You still have to kind of teach them how to control themselves.
Yeah.
And part of it then is teaching them how to recognize when this is a hard thing for you.
Yeah.
I'm asking you to do something that's harder for you than somebody else. Here are the tools we're going to use to make it more successful for you. But you have to recognize that you may have to raise your hand and say, I need to go stand at the back of the room right now because I can't sit still in my seat anymore. And teaching them that agency piece of it is still part of, there's still boundaries, there's still stuff that has to be done. And so, it's hard sometimes when people go, oh, it's ADHD.
Sure.
You're like, okay, but it's not managed.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good way to.
Yeah, that's the piece of it
rebuttal.
is there's a management piece to this.
Well, so it's a lot of times with kids, you, like, for me at least, I try to look at every kid as a little. They're a little person.
Right.
And they're only reacting off of what's going on in their home. So sometimes, like when mom's about to have another baby, there's a lot of acting out because they can feel the change happening.
Right. They know something's up.
Something's up. They're not sure what. And then, or you've just got, parents that might be fighting with each other and not realizing that their kids can hear them.
And even
or-
when you're off in a different room, kids know when mom and dad are not getting along. They can read a room better than most adults can. They know when stuff is disruptive. They know, I always say, even good stress is stress. And when you're stressed, you regress. Everybody does, which is why when adults are stressed out, sometimes they have full-blown temper tantrums. They go back to toddlerhood. Everybody does that. Good stress, bad stress. When you're excited about a trip, your fuse is a little shorter. When you're excited about the new baby, it may be a good thing and exciting, but it's still a change. And when you're stressed, you regress. And so, yeah, they know those things are going on. They sense those things. And sometimes parents forget that, or parents are struggling with stuff. They're not getting along with their exes, and I'm getting like the dirty laundry in the office. And I'm like, they're hearing all of this.
Sure.
They know this is happening, and that recognition that those things affect behavior too. There's a huge part of it is what you're experiencing.
Well, and I can see too, like with some of the kids that come in, some of the parents are still grieving a part of their perceived child's life.
Right.
And so sometimes they're stressed out and like over apologetic. And I was like, we're here for that reason. Your kid's allowed to, let me know that he doesn't like this or whatever, but we're going to find a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
Right.
We see that a lot here. We have mainly new families that come to see us where they come in and kiddo is either screaming or hands in the, just kind of trying to self-soothe,
Overwhelmed, yep.
very overwhelmed in the situation. And we see that a lot with newer families that come to us where they're like, I'm so sorry. But that's why
This is why we do this.
we do this, right? And that's why the podcast is an extension of what we're doing to kind of destigmatize all of this. I mean, if we didn't want to do it, we wouldn't be here. We kind of have the beauty. We've talked through that's kind of the beauty of what we've cultivated in this space is that we genuinely appreciate them coming to see us and trusting us in this moment. And it's the least that we can do to understand and help through that moment.
I think there's a lot of families who don't expect people to meet their kid where their kid is at or have run into people who won't. And
Yes.
I see that a lot of times in my office because I do see a lot of kids with autism for their primary care needs. And I really, if they can't sit still on the exam table for me to do an exam, that's fine. I have stood up and walked around and followed a kiddo with a stethoscope in my ear to get a chance to listen to their heart sounds. If we get a blood pressure, great. If we don't, I'll decide if we really need one or not. And that'll decide if it's worth that battle. And sometimes I have parents who are really surprised that I will go where the kid goes to do the exam and not fight it if it's not something I need to know right then as part of figuring out what's going on with them that day. Because they've had doctors be frustrated because the kid couldn't sit there and say when they needed them to.
Yeah.
And so they run into that a lot, especially if they've been struggling for a while and they don't know why. So how do we help? That they kind of go, oh, you're okay with this. And I'm like, yeah, we'll meet them where they're at. When there's spaces that are set up to meet them where they're at. Think about it. When you encounter teachers who kind of have alternative seating and the bouncy seats and stuff like that in the classroom as a thing that anybody and everybody can use. It's not just you can only use it if you have your IEP or your 504 plan.
Yeah.
But when teachers go, everybody's got a limit to how long they can sit still, and everybody needs to wiggle and move. And so if you need to stand, go stand over there. And if you need the bouncy seat, grab it. And if you're playing with that more than paying attention, then you won't be able to use it. But if you're using it the way it's intended, then you see every kid in that room thrive and feel comfortable and be okay, because it turns out you don't necessarily have to have a diagnosis to have a hard time sitting still or to not like how a buzz of a trimmer feels.
Absolutely.
Everybody has sensory things they do and don't like. And so when you kind of set up spaces to be like, really don't care if you have a diagnosis or not, we'll work with you where you're at.
Yeah.
Again, that takes the disorder piece out of it.
Yep. Yes.
It takes the disorder piece out of it and says, this is your operating system, this is your operating system, this is your operating system. If you show me what your operating system is, I'll meet you where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Takes the stigma out of that.
Yeah.
That's been one of the beautiful things about Heather when so she's helped a lot. What's the school over this
Sonnenberg?
Yeah, you've kind of done some work with them. So when she came to us here, she really kind of enlightened us in how to help with little things here and there. But that's been one of the beautiful things about her. She'll more than once she's done haircuts on her knees by the door, that kind of thing.
My favorite is the one who sat in my lap during his haircut.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd let me do his whole haircut.
Yep.
He just sat in my lap the whole time. He doesn't anymore. So it's like a bittersweet moment. But
You grew up past that. But yeah, when kids crawl up into my lap while I'm doing the evaluations, and the parents are like, I'm sorry. I'm like, they're fine. I'm sitting there patting their back because they just needed the sensory stuff, and I'm still asking questions, and the parents are looking at me like
100%. And then it's fun to know, like,
what works?
but also they trust you enough to do that with you. Like, I won't cry.
Well, it's funny because they come back the next time and they know they're okay, and they know I'm not going to get frustrated with them, and we get more done each time because they can tolerate it. So.
And even if we've seen this here too, even if it's not the next time, there's always a little bit of a time frame. We've seen kiddos take up to a year to get used to it, but when it happens, it's magical. Yeah. Anyway, how do we start to change the conversation? Like in your professional opinion, how do we start to change the conversation? How do we?
I think one is we start having it more often. I think we have it in ways like this over a podcast. I think we have it at parent-teacher conference nights. I think we talk about that everybody's on that spectrum of things you do well and don't do well, and everybody's got strengths and weaknesses. And it's okay to say that, and it's okay to acknowledge it because, again, giving it a name isn't labeling a kid. And the more we treat giving it a name as that's my information for how you tend to operate or where I need to meet you at, then it's less of it's a label and it's a bad thing and you're going to get shoved off into the special ed room, or you're going to get shoved off over here. We're going to say don't come to VBS because we can't handle you. The more we kind of, assume everybody in the room needs a little extra help here and there, and everybody's going to function at a different level. And the more we kind of operate that way, it kind of opens that door to say, this is something I struggle with, or, hey, I'm having a hard time with this. And because I always say on the medical end of it, medication is a very small piece for both ADHD and for autism. Medication stuff and the stuff I do on the medical side is a really small piece of how we manage those kids.
Yeah.
It's getting parents more ideas. It's getting them started in conversations. When I do new diagnosis for autism, I look at the parents and go, I'm going to give you a list of resources, but it's a really, it's the list I've gathered, and it is just the tip of the iceberg. And then you're going to go to this page and you're going to go sign up for the parents group because, by the way, they live it 24/7. And they've had to creatively problem solve things I would never even have thought of that are brilliant. And you're going to go ask questions on that group. And then you're going to go to this place. And when you go to ABA, you're going to meet other people. And they're going to have more ideas. And my answer is not always the right one. And you don't always have to listen to me. But you're going to start asking questions and finding yourself in rooms where other people have said, oh, I've been here before. Here, let me show you how to go. And the more we put them in those settings where people go, oh, yeah, I've been here, this has worked. Have you thought about? Have you ever talked about? The more that conversation happens, the less stigma it'll be, and the more it'll be of I've never even thought of that. Yeah. Sure. I think that's where we get the change.
What you just said, resources. What resources are available to families?
Depends on where you live, depends on kind of the situation or the things that you need. But there are a lot of parent websites, and there are a lot of good pieces of information. There's something called Attitude Magazine that for ADHD and things like that. They have a Facebook page, they have a website. They put up great articles. I have learned so much as a parent of kids with ADHD from kind of looking at how do you manage day-to-day stuff? How do you get your kid to remember to brush their teeth?
Sure.
And that answer is different for every kid, so I don't have the secret, so don't ask. But it's, things like, oh, that's why they do, looking at kind of the executive function piece of it. And that when I first was getting trained as an NP, we really didn't talk about the executive function piece of it. We talked about, do they meet 6 of these 9 criteria, and does it happen both at home and at school? Then it's ADHD, and here's the medicine, but you tell them to go look for behavioral things. And you're like, so what behavioral things am I telling them to go look for? So over time, I've accumulated more resources like that. There's several different organizations. CHAD is one of them. It's, I'm going to I'm going to forget what the CH is, and then attention deficit disorder, but chad.org, it's 2 Ds, has a lot of good information on there. On the autism side, what used to be Southeast Association of Autism Society of Southeast Wisconsin, that's what it was, ASSEW, is now Autism United, because people like me fumbled their name.
Gotcha.
But that one is a huge resource to parents, because it's got like a parent's guide, and it's got a list of, like, here's a list of dentists that handle kids with autism.
Oh, that's
here's
beautiful.
a list of, behavioral therapists if you need this. Here's a list of psychologists if you need to go get a psych eval for Social Security stuff. Here's a list. And so there's good resources out there, and there are parent groups and things like that. And I laugh because I've even found out about stuff from folks that work in our office whose kids have special needs. And they're like, do you know about this? I'm like, no, write it down. It's going on my list for parents.
Sure, yeah.
And things. There's a really cool gym up in Racine called We Rock the Spectrum.
Yeah.
And they do parent nights and things like that, and they do education, and it's phenomenal. So there's a lot of good resources out there, but the thing is, it's hard to, you got to know where to find them.
Yeah.
So the more we do the word of mouth, and the more I give parents a 2-page list and go, this isn't everything. Start here,
Sure.
ask questions.
Yeah.
Because it's hard when you have a kid who struggles in things and needs extra resources, and you need to think creatively about how do I help them, because the typical solutions don't work. You as the parent end up to be their advocate. You have to be the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. You have to be the one that kind of makes a fuss, because if you don't, then they're going to be like, oh, they must be fine, then they're not squeaking anymore. So we don't have to go out of our way to think creatively. So with school, I'm like, you can reconvene an IEP as many times as you need to. You can be the pesterer if this isn't working for your kid. And I laugh because I will tell parents I'll write whatever letters and things, because for some dumb reason, putting initials behind my name gets stuff done that the parents have asked for 3 times.
Yeah.
If I write it and say this is appropriate, it gets done. So I look at them like, tell me, I will write the letters, because I know that's how the system works.
Yeah.
And so, giving parents permission to be the squeaky wheel sometimes is needed too. And I tell them, especially with new diagnoses, of you're going to have to be the one that kind of brings us up,
Advocates.
Fusses, advocates,
Yeah.
grabs the next resource, calls the next person, finds,
Sure.
can I talk to your manager? You can do it in a non-Karen way, but
Sure.
sometimes you have to go over their head, because if you just get a flat out no, you may need to keep going. And they need permission sometimes to keep going.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have any advice for parents that are feeling really stressed about the situation? Like, any recommendations on?
I remind them they're human. They need breaks. They need time away. Some folks are lucky enough to have family members and things that can help and step in. But for those folks who aren't, there's things like, there's respite care available. So both Wisconsin and Illinois have a long-term support waiver system that's done through the state. It's things like, depending on the diagnosis, you get state Medicaid behind even private insurance. So the stuff that your private insurance doesn't cover, the state then covers. There's money for respite care. You can be the one that hires the people, and you can even hire family members in that. But then there's mechanism for them to be able to pay for that respite care. So I've known people who've kind of, like, a grandparent did it as their part-time job then, and was their aide at school or things like that, because there's funding from the state to do that. So it's not all on them. Again, talking to other people that have kids who struggle with this, because sometimes it's, hey, can you take them for a day, and then I will help you with yours another day, and kind of being able to tag team and surround yourself with the people who get it, because there's always going to be aunts and uncles and grandparents who don't get it, that we didn't have that in our generation. No, you did. We just didn't diagnose it that often.
Or what are you talking about? That's you.
Exactly. Apples don't fall far from your trees. There's the tree. So, it's not always going to be family that supports them. So, talk to people, make friends with people, ask about resources, ask about where do you go to get this done? How do you get this done? There's so much to word of mouth that's a piece of it. But again, kind of being okay with saying, hey, I don't know, where do we, or how do I? And that's scary for some people, and especially if they've not gotten a lot of help in the past, it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And so, but finding those friends, getting that support, and knowing that So one of the coolest things I ever learned from my first boss when I actually worked in child psych for a little bit. That's how I got the training to do what I do. And he always told parents this: you're going to read, especially for autism, you're going to read about a bazillion different things that parents will swear up and down cured their child or magical cures. Very few of them have a lot of evidence to support them. A lot of them cost a decent amount of money. So doing specialized diets, removing food, artificial food coloring, getting some kids go on gluten-free or casein-free diets and things like that. There's not a lot of science to support it. It's more anecdotal. Parents will say, hey, this got better, or that got better. And he used to say to the parents, you're welcome to try any of those things that aren't going to be harmful to your child, up until the point where if it interferes with your ability to be your child's number one fan, then no, I'm not going to support it. Because your child is already in a position where they're going to struggle possibly with relationships, especially in the world of autism. They're going to struggle with some of these areas, and they're going to have a lot of people who aren't their number one fan. You already love them unconditionally. That is your biggest job. The rest of it isn't anywhere near as important as that. Keeping that bond safe. So those parents who are stressed and feel overwhelmed need to hear that, then it's okay to take a break from that. Mm-hmm. It's okay to take a break from occupational therapy if going 2 times a week means you never get a minute to catch your breath and you're coming home from work and trying to get out the door and they're getting to bed late, then it's okay to take a break. If this is getting overwhelming and interfering with your ability to be your kid's number one fan and to love them unconditionally, then it's okay to say that's not what we're doing right now. You don't have to do all the things because the interwebs said, hey, this will help, this will help, this will help, this will help. You pick the things that seem to work and fit for you, your child, and your family.
What about a family who is seeing some things early on? Is there anything that is that'd be hard to say, right? There's nothing that's like a sure this sign of something. Let's get them checked out. Like, is there anything?
So for autism, especially by 18 months, there are some red flags in terms of language delays and, do they look at you when something is new or scary or exciting? Do they look to you to see how you read it? If they see something they're excited about, do they try to share it with you? Do they actually point at something when they're excited, or do they just kind of stand there and because again, that idea of gestures being one of the things we look at in autism and things, so pointing and things. There's a questionnaire that a lot of offices use at that 18-month checkup that is specific to screening for autism. And 18 months is about the earliest we can start to go, okay, we might be heading down this road. We'll see some speech delays sometimes before that. But because of when kids normally develop those social skills, and there's a wide range of normal for everybody, so we don't really start to say, hey, that's a delay until about that 18-month phase. I always tell parents, if there's something you see that you think is off, at least talk to us. We may say, hey, it's too early. We may say, let's try these things and see if they get better at that, if we're concretely teaching them instead of assuming that they're going to pick it up automatically. And we'll watch, or we'll say, hey, yeah, there's some tendencies here. Let's at least get them started with birth to 3 and doing some occupational therapy or some PT or things like that. And let's see where we're at when we go and intentionally intervene. Because we know early intervention is king. The earlier we intervene, the better the outcomes are.
Sure.
And so if they're seeing things early and they're not sure, talk to their pediatrician. Yeah. And if their pediatrician's like, then I say, try another one.
Okay.
Because sometimes you will still, unfortunately, meet old school folks who go, oh, it's just because they're a boy, they don't settle down to this. Or it's just because of this, they don't do that. Or they're just the nod dog. And if it's enough that it has a parent concerned or worried, or it's interfering with their kid and they don't feel like their kid is doing well, then that shouldn't be blown off.
Yeah. So it's okay to get a second opinion.
Absolutely.
That was in my notes because actually while we've been talking to some of our clients coming through, we had one mention that I had to go to 3 different doctors before they would acknowledge, and it was it stinks that is the case, but it's so good to, and you've said it already time and time again in our conversation, advocate for yourself and for your family.
Well, I feel like science in general. Or the medical field, it's overwhelmed anyway, and you've got people coming in, and you've got some people who are genuine hypochondriacs.
Yes,
and they you know, every little thing. Or you've got people who, you know, I'm big into true crime. So, you know, what is that stuff called? Munchausen by proxy or whatever. But like even just going to the doctor, like my friend had endometriosis and she wasn't diagnosed until she had a cyst grow on her ovary. And then they operated on her and we're like, holy cow.
Yeah, right. You're like, this is what I've been telling you for a while. Especially when I was a nursing instructor, and that I always tell people, you are not allowed to blow somebody off until you've investigated, because they're the expert on their child. I may be the expert on the autism or the ADHD or what have you, but they're the expert on their child. And if they are telling you something is off about their child, you need to investigate it further before you go, oh, that's fine, that's normal. You need to actually kind of, you know, follow up with a few more questions, look into it, watch how they interact in the office. And then if, you know, and I've had several people come into my office who saw this TikTok or that reel, and I'm pretty sure it's this, and I go, I don't think so. But then it's when I sit down and explain, because it hasn't been there this long or it's been this, and I can explain to them why I don't think it is, then they know I've at least listened to them and, you know, gave it some thought and said, you know, let's watch this, or really, I don't think so, or let's see where we're at in another 6 months as we get a chance to mature and grow. Are we getting better? If not, then we're going to do something about it. You know, and that getting a chance to be heard piece is very important. If they're not listening to you, go talk to somebody else. Absolutely.
I know we're wrapping up. Thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. If you could send a message to parents listening. I know we've gotten a lot of buzz around this particular episode. So if there is a message that you could just give a parent who might be thinking about getting checked out or in that realm, what would you say?
So the parents who are kind of on the fence about, do I get them checked out? Do I not get them checked out? I like to remind them that giving them a diagnosis doesn't create anything that wasn't already there. When I see kids and I tell parents that, yeah, this is autism, I always remind them that the same kiddo who walked in this door is walking out of this door. Me giving it a name doesn't change a darn thing today. But it means that you're validated in, I knew something was up. 2, it gives you some information about what exactly is up and how do we go forward from here. And sometimes we're going to say, yeah, it's this. But right now they're functioning. And do we need to do anything? No. But when we watch for, you know, let's look at, you know, if they're running into this issue, if they're running into that issue. So going and saying something to somebody else that you're worried about something with your kid doesn't make it, you know, a self-fulfilling prophecy. That issue is there. Your concern is there already. Talk to somebody else about it, because it may be that is a normal child development thing. This is when it's going to get better, and this is how you address it, and this is how we can make it stop. Versus, nope, you're right. You caught that early, and let's watch for this. Or these are some things we can do about it. You may find out you get good answers that way. So don't be afraid that getting a formal diagnosis is kind of the end of it.
Sure.
And again, you get to share who knows that diagnosis. If you're worried somebody's going to be like, it's a label and shove them aside, they don't need to know. You get to share that. I don't send that off to the school. You know, it's in your medical record, but you get to decide who sees your medical record too. So you still have that control over it, and getting a name to it doesn't change the awesomeness of the kid in front of you.
Exactly.
It gives you more tools to figure out how to help them the best that they can.
Well, that's one thing that we see here too, is sometimes people don't tell us there's a diagnosis, and they might not even know yet. And we always kind of look out for little signs like tiptoe walking and like obsession with the wheels. And some of it's like boys. Some boys like cars, they like wheels, but then, you know, or girls like wheels, but like the hyperfixation of it. But I always try to encourage people, like, if you have this, just let us know so that we can either set more time aside or go to it slower or whatever, because it really does. We want your kid to have the best experience possible. And sometimes that means a great haircut. Sometimes that means an okay haircut. And sometimes that means just part of a haircut.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. And if I know that your kiddo is scared about something, then I can show it to them first and let them handle it and let them kind of be the one who sprays or things like that. And other kids that you can say, hop up in the chair and let's go. And they can do it without that extra prep. If you give me a heads up that they hate having their ears looked at, we'll do all sorts of goofy things, and they'll check my ears and things. And then I'll say, okay, let's look and see if there's any butterflies in your ears. You know,
I say potatoes.
I always say butterflies because potatoes, we don't want you to stick potatoes in your ears.
No, yeah, I guess not.
You know,
Yeah.
kids can be creative sometimes. So I always say butterflies because then I joke around about it. I think that would tickle if that happened. When they, whether your kid's got a diagnosis or not, if you know something about them, that's how they work and how they tick, share it with others because then they're going to be more successful and things are going to get smoother.
Yeah.
Can we all? I know we're supposed to be wrapping.
You're fine.
Oh, it's all good.
You're fine.
But there is this like idea that kids on the spectrum aren't as intelligent, like they say, like more. What is it called? How do they say it all the time? Like lower on the spectrum or higher on the spectrum or what?
Kind of talking about severity. Or?
Yes, they're talking about severity, but then it's like kind of derogatory language.
So here's the thing. You can have kids who are nonverbal and flap all the time and don't make eye contact at all and have IQs of 140 and know exactly what's going on around them and understand everything that everybody else is saying and just don't have that verbal skill yet. And there have been many instances of people who are nonverbal who once they got like to be able to type or things like that and were able to actually share their thoughts and they're like, oh, you knew that was going on the whole time. You can't assume anybody's level of functioning by what you see on the outside. You can't assume their understanding by where they're at the outside. And I laugh because we deal with teenagers all the time in my world. And I joke around about you always start out talking to them at a high level. You can always back it down as you need to or explain more or give more information or ease it up. But if you start out low and you treat somebody like they're an idiot when they're not, they ain't listening to another word you say. You talk to a teenager like they're a 5-year-old, they are done with you. And you're not getting them back.
Yeah.
And that goes for any human being. Aim high, you can always explain things more. You can always simplify it, right, and meet them at their level. But if you automatically assume somebody doesn't understand something because they're nonverbal, you assume spells what it spells. So you can't assume that about people. You have to treat everybody with dignity and respect, and that's huge.
Because it always bothers me a little bit when I talk to a kid and the mom and dad are like, they don't talk. I'm like, well, he's still listening.
Yeah, exactly. They still pass their hearing test. I'm still going to tell him what I'm doing.
And I'm okay if he doesn't answer me. I'll just keep talking. That's what I'm paid to do.
I mean, in the hospital setting, we talk to unconscious patients because it turns out after the fact, some of them have memories of it. So you talk to everybody. You treat them all with that respect.
This parenthetical. There's a movie called The Accountant. Have you ever seen it?
I've not seen that one yet.
Or heard of it? I love that movie, and even more so now. I think now as a parent, it's Ben Affleck and another actor. And Ben Affleck has somewhere in the spectrum of autism. But the whole thing is the second one. Actually, they made a part 2. They have some actors in there who are actually on the spectrum, and it's such a cool movie because they're not playing the person in the corner. They're all like hacking computers, and they're like, this is what we do. And I love those scenes so much. Anyway, that's parenthetical. One of the last things I wanted to bring up, I like that you said earlier, so much of this, even the resources, sometimes even the meds, those are all kind of tip of the iceberg things. There's a lot that goes into the nature versus nurture side of things. As I was deep diving into this for the last couple of weeks, I came across an article in the New York Times that was published in April 2025. And there's a little excerpt that I really, really enjoyed because it spoke to me as a parent. And it says the following: I think my brain had probably matured to the point where I had the capacity I didn't have earlier on. This is Sanuga Bark who's saying this. At the time, suddenly I was in a context where my natural way of thinking was valuable. The combination of those two was revelatory to me. He graduated, Sanuga Bark graduated from Bangor, collected a master's degree and a PhD, and then went on to positions of academic prestige, including being elected to the Academy of Medical Sciences and named the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry. I asked Sanuga Bark what he might have gained if he grew up in a different time and place, if he were prescribed Ritalin or Adderall at age 8 instead of being just packed off to the remedial classes. I don't think I would have gained anything, he said. I think without medication, you learn alternative ways of dealing with stuff. In my particular case, there are a lot of characteristics that have helped me. My mind is constantly churning away, thinking of things. I never relax. The way I motivate myself is to turn everything into a problem, and I try to solve the problem. Sanuga Bark says, he has known plenty of young people, including some in his own family, who have benefited from taking a stimulant medication. He just doesn't think it's accurate or helpful to think of Adderall or Ritalin as a medical solution to a medical disorder. The simple model has always been basically ADHD plus medication equals no ADHD, he says, but that is not true. Medication is not a silver bullet. It never will be. What medication can sometimes do, he believes, is allow families more room to communicate. At its best, he says, medication can provide a window for parents to engage with their kids by moderating children's behavior, at least temporarily, so that family life can become more than just endless fights about overdue homework or lost lunch boxes. If you have more of a positive relationship with your child, they're going to have a better outcome. Not for their ADHD, it's probably just going to stay the same. But in terms of dealing with the self-hatred and low self-esteem that often comes along with ADHD, and as a parent who has seen some of this already, I resonated so much with this because we are in the medication. We didn't even get into medication. You're going to have to come back. We didn't even get into the medication realm, but I am seeing that like now, even with a little bit of medication, I'm able to see my son even a little bit more engaged in things that we're talking about or not so engaged in things that he maybe didn't really care about before. And it's beautiful because I'm able to see him in a different light.
I always like to explain to parents that medicine is one of the tools in the toolbox.
Yeah.
It's the child who's got to make the good choices. It's the child who's got to sit down and get their homework done. It's, that the child still has to do that, but tools are intended to make your job easier. I kind of give the analogy that, can a carpenter build a house without a hammer? They can, but it's a lot harder work. You got to find a rock or something else to nail the nails in, and it's going to take you longer, and you're going to have to work harder to do it. Can a hammer build a house without a carpenter? Nope. The hammer's a tool. Medicine is one tool in the toolbox. Sometimes we do different therapies are a tool in the toolbox. Sometimes the setting is a tool in the toolbox. Give your child all the tools they need to be successful.
Yeah.
That idea of it, when that self-hatred and the I feel bad about myself because I know I'm going to get in trouble and I know mom and dad are going to get a call from the teacher because I got into trouble again at school today because I was impulsive and I hauled off and decked somebody and it wasn't something that I did, on purpose and I don't know how to control it.
Or that they're not understanding the homework.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they get down on themselves and I always tell parents, especially with ADHD meds, and I'll happily come back and talk about that again another time. Some people don't give it on the weekends or give it over the summer, and that's entirely up to you. However, if, ADHD is not just an academic problem, it impacts all areas of life. And if you not giving the medicine on the weekend mean you have to spend all day correcting them, nagging them, sitting on them to get their homework done, why does school get all the good behavior? Give them all the tools in their toolbox to be successful of the things you are demanding of them. Yeah. And that's the approach we've had at my house. And I laugh because now my kids are big kids and they have a say in this. And they're funny because they'll be like, I need my medicine. I get annoying if I haven't taken it. They recognize that piece of it. They go, all I've got to do is this today. And I can usually hang with that. And, hey, we're going to go to the food festival and I don't want my appetite down. Are you okay if I skip my medicine? Yep, as long as you're doing fine, I'm fine with it. And we know we have that flexibility. ADHD meds and there's a lot of medicines on the behavioral side that have to be taken consistently to keep levels up. But ADHD medicines have a lot of flexibility. And so I tell parents, it's fine. You can exercise that flexibility, but don't deprive them of that tool and then expect them to be able to function at that level.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's with any parent though. Like I've talked to my parents before about toolbox because my mom had a pretty traumatic childhood. My dad had a pretty traumatic childhood. So they did the best they could with the tools that they were given in life. And, there's also this like little candy heart meme that's out there that I love. And I want it like framed in my house. And it's 2 candy hearts. And they both said, I don't want my kid messed up the way I was. And the other one says the same thing. And then the little kid says messed up in a completely new way. So it's like you can't be too hard on yourself on trying to be perfect.
Right.
But there's always room for growth. There's always room to but like earn new tools in your toolbox.
Learn new tools and things like that. Yeah, try new things. Try different stuff. Ask other people because they may have ideas that you've never been, you've never encountered because your parents didn't function that way. And, or that, going to therapy was very frowned upon. And it turns out, getting a chance to talk about this stuff. When I have kids who've had kind of traumatic things or bad things, I have an analogy about shoving everything in your closet and shoving the door closed. And, that's how we clean up our rooms. But that's what we do with thoughts that are hard for us or things.
Sure.
So we shove it all to the back of our brain and hope it stays there. But what happens if we don't learn how to deal
Manage
with
those.
it and go in there and put everything away the way it's supposed to be is it pops open at the worst possible time and you react. And so, having those opportunities to kind of learn that there are other tools and other options here is huge, and not everybody realizes it. And so they have to kind of ask and think about it and that. So
Beautiful. We opened up some questions to some of our viewers, and they came back with a couple, and I'm going to hit you with some. How much does screen time play in neurodivergence?
So does screen time cause neurodivergence? No. Can screen time impact how kids do? Yes. So we have a lot of evidence, especially over the last 5-7 years, to say that addictions to screens are a thing. It activates the same centers in your brain that drugs can activate. You get withdrawal symptoms. And I do see that. I'll have parents be like, yeah, as soon as they come home from school, they're in their room, they're on their video games, they barely get off to eat dinner, they're on them until I make them turn it off to go to bed. And so those are kids that we'll talk about. Let's do a detox. And I'm sorry, but cold turkey is sometimes the easiest way. And the first few days are going to be awful because they are going to be irritable and cranky and twitchy, and they're going to come off of it hard like you would expect somebody to come off of a drug. But then after a few days, you will see more engagement, less irritability, more willingness to be around other people. They kind of feel better. And so being conscious of screen time is important. I don't think all screens are evil. I think there are video games and things like that can be good for kids, and every kid's a little different in terms of how much they crave it and how much they need it.
Sure.
We know with my youngest, he wasn't turning in things because he knew he had to get his homework done to get to
the game.
Switch.
Oh, sure.
And so he would tell me everything was done, and we found out it wasn't, and we just said, okay, we're not even going to ask about homework anymore. You don't get it during the week.
Yeah.
And he kind of, after the fact, went, yeah, okay, that was a good choice, because then he wasn't like, oh, I gotta, and so we know, and he knows now, and he's getting old enough to be like, yeah, I know I got to take a break from that. And so, we've set some of those limits. Screen time absolutely can make it worse. It doesn't cause neurodivergence. And again, nowadays, because we have access to the entire world on a device in our pockets, folks can entertain their deep dives and their restricted interests and learn a lot of things and have access to that, which is not a bad thing.
Sure.
But everything in moderation is a thing. And so we have to take some breaks. We have to come up for air. We can't dive into it. For kids for whom social interactions are tough, they would much prefer to text somebody than have a face-to-face conversation.
Yeah.
Because in a face-to-face conversation, you have to interpret facial expressions, gestures, tone of voice, sarcasm, that you don't have to do in a text. You can read the emoji and go, they were laughing about that. Okay, that must have been sarcasm, or things like that. And so in some ways we use those tools. And for some kids, that's their area where they go, okay, then I can communicate here because it's not overwhelming to me and I don't have to struggle with all of those pieces. So tech can have a lot of pluses, but screen time can absolutely, if it's more than what your kid can handle, you're going to see the irritability, the difficulty getting them to come away from it,
Sure.
and it can impede. So
Next question. Is the medical community pursuing any new therapies? Like there's all the stem cell stuff or magnetic therapies. Like there's all these things.
So always we're looking at some new things. There's quite a bit of research that's been going on even over the last decade in that to kind of learn a little bit more about autism specifically, but also for ADHD. There have been a few new stimulants on the market, but not a lot in the last few years. So, but they keep working on some non-stimulant medication options. There hasn't been a whole lot, at least that I'm aware of, in terms of magnetic therapy that's really come out and said, hey, yeah, we're on the right track.
Sure.
There are definitely folks studying a lot of different things. So before I had kind of alluded to, there's a lot of solutions on the web, diets and things like that to help kids with autism. We've absolutely been studying those things along the way. And when we get evidence to support, we get it out there when there's not a lot of evidence. And so there's a lot of those things that are kind of, hey, it could be. And when we actually like try to test it and like look at the differences between kids who get it and don't, we're not seeing that vast difference. And so stem cell isn't really leaning itself towards these particular areas just yet. Again, part of it is there's genetics involved. And so stem cells aren't going to fix that.
Yeah. This one was interesting. What is a reasonable amount of time to allow someone with ADHD to process a seemingly simple request like put your shoes on?
Depends on how quickly you have to be out the door.
Sure.
So here's the thing. Some kids, verbal stuff is, if you're not like right in front of them and that they're not registering that that's happening. I didn't say this earlier, but one of the ways I like to explain ADHD is it's like having every app on your phone set to push notifications. Every little thing comes into your brain with breaking news level importance, but the problem is so does the next thing, whether it is as equally important or not. So, mom can say, get your shoes on, we got to go. But then I see the stuffed animal on the floor that's where I left that last night. I forgot. And then the dog's barking. So I need to go see why the dog is barking. And so it's not so much that there's a set amount of time, but it's learning as a parent, what are the ways we do this? For one of my kids, if I set a timer and say, by the time this goes off, you need to do this, that, and the other thing, give them 3 things. And the ticking timer is there. Get a move on, and they do it. For one of my kids, that makes them shut down. If you put a timer on me, I'm going to be so stressed about that timer, I'm not going to be able to make myself start doing those things. For one of my kids, if I rattle off 2 or 3 things, they can remember that and go do it. For one of them, I got to write it all down. So I always say for parents, one, if you know that it takes longer for your kid to follow through on that, get in the habit of giving warnings. And I always kind of laugh, for young kids, the behavior modification is on us as parents.
Sure.
Having routines, putting things in the same place, doing things the same way. I always joke around about somehow we never lost any shin guards in 12 years of kids playing soccer, but that's because I was really, on it. And as soon as we'd come in the door, it was put those in the bag and go put the bag on the hook.
Yeah, of course.
Because if it went to their room, I knew it would be never seen or heard from again. And so it's, having routines, or, hey, maybe it's a bell ringing, so it's a different sound, so it gets their attention. Maybe you need to have eye contact with them and say, hey, in 5 minutes, we need to leave. You need to put your shoes on. Repeat back to me. What do you need to do now?
Okay.
So every kid's a little different. There's not what's a reasonable amount of time. It's more of figuring out what's the best way to communicate that this is what we're doing next.
Okay. Along the same lines, this is the last one, how many steps would be appropriate to request at once? Like get your shoes on and in the car, like that kind of thing.
So in general, in kids, in child development, one of the rules I learned back when I worked in childcare in high school was we never give more than 3 things at a time. Most of us as adults, once you get past the third thing on the list, you're like, wait, what were all of those again? So as a general rule with kids, we try to keep multi-step things to 3 things. Most of us can handle that. And then, again, you meet your kid where they're at. If multi-step things go in one ear, ricochet, and bounce out the other ear, you may need to do one at a time and then give them the second one. Especially if, like for kids with ADHD who are struggling with that, you may need to say, do this and then come back to me. And then I'll give you the next thing. And then I always laugh as a parent, then I have to remember what the next thing was. Okay, hang on, I have to write it down for myself. But it's hard sometimes because as a parent, you want to rattle it off and I need you to do this and I need you to do that. But depending on how your kid is and how they process things, they may not be able to retain that. And so you learn the tricks and tools that work for your kid. And so it may be one thing and come back and check in with me. And then I'll give you the second thing we need to do.
Okay.
And some kids, you need to make it a game. Some kids, like that article quote was beautiful of if I turn it into a problem, then I can solve it. If I turn it into a game, they'll do it. If I make it a fun thing, they'll do it. If it's a list, they'll do it. If I say, hey, I need you to do this, I get a, why are you nagging me?
Sure.
Every kid, different things motivate them. Different things fire off those centers in the brain and get that dopamine going. And so there's not a right answer because it's what works for your kid.
Awesome.
That just takes a lot of patience from the parents.
Oh, too much patience.
Yes, it does.
I'm thinking about my own childhood, being told do the dishes, but never being taught how to do them.
Right.
And
well, that goes back to that motor planning idea that we talked about of you have to be able to picture what the end point is before you can figure out how to get there.
Sure.
My poor youngest is getting thrown under the bus today. He'll live. I'd have him fold his laundry and go put it away. Things would be in all different drawers. Dude, we just reorganized this. Let's get it reorganized again. Next week, go put your laundry away. Stuff would be in all the different drawers.
Yeah.
I read this article talking about that idea of working memory and motor planning and being able to picture the end point. And I went, let's try something. And I took a picture of his dresser organized. Now, granted, he could open a drawer and look and see that that's the shirt drawer. But out of sight, out of mind is a thing for ADHD kids. And so that picture to this day still lives on his dresser. And he will pull it down and look at it and be like, okay, that's the sock drawer.
Yeah.
It's not always perfect.
Yeah.
They're certainly not always folded. But it was what worked for him was we needed to be able to picture the end point to figure out how to get there. And so when parents start to understand that, okay, this is clearly the way we're doing this right now is not working. So, hey guys, we have to leave this house at this time or I'm going to be late for work and I'm going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
So let's figure out do we need to add more time? Do I need to do different reminders? Do you need it written down? And you try different things until you find the one that works. Yeah. And novelty helps with ADHD. So after a while of doing it the same way, you may have to change it. You may have to change it up and freshen it up because that one now we've learned to tune out.
Sure.
So, it takes a little bit of creativity and it does take a lot of patience on the parents' part. But when you start to go, oh, that's why they're doing it. Okay, I always say sometimes you have to zoom out and look at the wide angle lens of what is, you're not intentionally defying me when I say, put your shoes on. That Mary Poppins to Batman meme about get ready. I've been there. I've done that. We figured out we had to give my son a list because otherwise if I said get ready, I'd get like one shirt, a sock, and action figures would be blowing up again. And it was get ready. It was, hey, by 7:20, these things need to be done on your list.
Yeah.
Get to them. And then I could walk by and be like, where are you at on your list? Instead of having to do the,
Sure.
It was get back to your list.
Okay. Jackie, thank you.
You're welcome.
I love this.
Yeah, it was really
Now,
enlightening.
How can I use it at work?
Yeah, really.
It was a pleasure to get to come share some knowledge.
Thank you so much. And we can't wait to have you on. We didn't touch half of what I wanted to talk about.
We'll find another time.
That's
do that.
awesome. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Enjoy your day.
You too.
Let's go.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of Y'all Be Good. And as always, a reminder that we are a project of Little Lion Cuts. We hope you've enjoyed these stories just as much as we have enjoyed sharing them. Every family has a story, and we're just grateful that we get to hear yours too. If you've enjoyed today's episode and you think someone else might need to hear it, don't forget to share this podcast with them. And hey, while you're at it, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. That really does go a long way. You definitely don't want to miss out on any of the real, raw, and inspiring conversations we've got lined up. And we'd love to hear your stories too. So go ahead and find us on Instagram at y'allbegoodpod or drop us a message with your thoughts. And until next time, y'all be good.